Immediately following the anime OPs video, I knew I needed to do one for endings. I was also told by several people that I had to, so here we are. Just as I mentioned last time, I did actually forget some OPs just because I haven't seen the shows in so long. So as I continue to consume both old and new anime, I'll likely make a follow-up video in the future. Now this list is going to be a bit all over the place because I realized that after a certain era, I mostly stopped caring about endings the way I still do for OPs. Unless the track catches me right when it starts these days, or if I leave it on while reflecting on the episode, it's usually turned off immediately, particularly because I tend to watch anime in a binge format these days. However, I did make sure to cycle back through shows just to make sure there wasn't an ending I was forgetting. I didn't want to get anything lost in the shuffle, so I did my homework. As was the case with the OPs, I'll only be choosing one per franchise, which made 3 entries on this list agonizing to decide. These also won't be in any real order, so don't look to this as a ranking video, though I am open to doing an OP/ending tier list. I was also asked to include the titles of the respective anime the song is from for those who weren't necessarily familiar with everything on the OPs list, so I will be doing that. But before we begin, as always, a huge shout out to the lovely people over on Patreon for their continued support. If you'd like to support the channel, stick around to the end. Also, feel free to join us on Discord. We're a pretty friendly community and it's always nice to see new faces. Enough of that though, let's hop on into the list. I think Illumina does a wonderful job of capturing the stifling tone of Death Note as a piece of media. The melancholy droning of the rhythm guitar, the subdued drums in the beginning before the lead guitar comes in to add a catchy melody is a nice build-up to the chorus. The visuals also stand out in their simplicity by framing Light's sense of isolation that comes from his superiority complex, as well as highlighting his eyes at the beginning and end to emphasize the madness therein. It's kind of a perfect fit for a show like Death Note. So I actually discovered that I'm in the minority for enjoying this ending the most out of the endings for Yu Hakusho, but I think that's due to how I consumed the media originally, which was through Toonami. And Toonami had a very bad habit of making it about halfway through an arc before jumping all the way back to the beginning. So I heard this song over and over and over, and it's just baked into my soul the same way Smile Bomb is. I never truly ended up enjoying the other endings, and I think the closest I get upon rewatch is enjoying the third ending, but it would be disingenuous of me to put that on the list here now. The Homework Never Ends is such an iconic song to me, from the static but detailed visuals in the verse with each character getting literal time in the spotlight to the insanely catchy guitar riff. I will always look to this as the ending theme until the heat death of the universe. One thing you'll likely realize about this list is so much of it comes from years long gone. The jazz and blues combination of this track was always a perfect conclusion to any episode of Cowboy Bebop, regardless of if that episode was funny, sad, or action-heavy. Mai Yamane has an almost haunting voice that really props up the already wonderful instrumentation. The background visuals were essentially just static images of Spike in various situations that don't have to be anything more than they are because of how well that stylistic choice meshes with the song itself. If I heard this song as a kid, I knew I was up way later than I meant to be. It's an absolutely classic track. I remember back when I got into anime as a kid and didn't know how to properly say the word anime, my mom bought me a few DVDs to kind of whet my appetite, and among them was a show called VanDread. The show itself was bizarre, but I distinctly remember being captivated by this ending track. I think it's that mid-2000s R&B feel it's got going on that you just don't see anywhere anymore, alongside the very floaty, almost airy vocal performance. The visuals themselves are questionable. Like, after the first time I saw it, I swore I'd get in trouble if my mom walked in. The visuals are a bit hornier than I was expecting in a way that I'm sure would take many of you by surprise, though the show is just as horny. Good song, though.
It's just my imagination, a sort of empty concentration.
I didn't think I'd end up hopping over the localization barrier, but the Funimation version of this song is what I'm the most familiar with, and to say I was obsessed with Detective Conan as a kid would be a meteoric understatement. I really can't explain to you why the song captivated me so much, but I would always end up nodding along when it began, and it would pop in my head for years after I stopped watching. And funny enough, I never actually knew what the song was called or who it was by until pulling notes together for this video. What a fun song this is to have playing after the often grim episodes of Jujutsu Kaisen. It's a pretty solid bop, and I am a huge fan of the visual style and the contemporary outfits placed on the characters. The instrumentation is so full of life, especially with the brass section going to town. This falls pretty neatly into a category I'd call summer songs. You know, the kind of track you can see yourself nodding your head to while driving with the windows down on a nice day. It gives that kind of vibe. This is one of the three I had a pretty tough time deciding for. I actually like several endings in Bleach, and I came so close to landing on Kansha, but I ended up here because of what this song represents. This ending hits kinda different because it came at the end of an era for Bleach. The show was going off the air, at the time, permanently, and I remember getting kinda teary with how they did this particular ending. YouTube kinda hates when Bleach content is uploaded, so I'll probably have to use some dumb composite just to avoid getting sniped by the algorithm. But essentially, the visuals for this final ending were clips from all through Bleach, covering not just Ichigo's journey, but the journeys of plenty others. It was a great way to pay respect to the legacy they'd created, show the audience just how far we'd come, as well as say goodbye in its own way. The song is also just insanely catchy, specifically the melody of the lead guitar and the cadence of the vocalist. The full song is just as good, and damn did it make me sad that Bleach was coming to an end. Glad to see that 10 years later it's back in an absolutely top form. Weirdly, I have the exact opposite problem this time around that I had with the OPs, by which I mean I legitimately only like the first ending. There wasn't anything else that really stuck out to me both when I initially ran through the series and upon revisiting for this video. That may be one of the victims of consuming the story in a binge format, but that's where I'm at with it. Shooting Star wins by default, but I also do enjoy the song itself along with the visual style representative of Naruto looking back on his frenemy status with Sasuke. I was already familiar with these guys and their style since they've also done an ending for Bleach, so it was easy to just enjoy what was on my plate. I'm a big fan of the flow of the verse and how it rides that very 2000s instrumental. A wonderful first ending for what ended up being a solid journey overall despite the filler. When this song was airing, I wasn't really expecting it to live rent-free in my head the way it does. It's a beautiful song that gives me the same warm feelings as the kind of tracks you'd hear at the end of a Disney or DreamWorks film during the 90s. That kind of soft song that caps off an emotional journey type of vibe, if that makes any sense. Like If I Never Knew You at the end of Pocahontas or When You Believe from The Prince of Egypt. It pulls me back to that kind of era. There's a disconnected nostalgia here that keeps it in my mind. The pastels of the visuals are delightful after the black and white imagery that focuses on the eyes of the ladies, and I love the flow of the animation once it truly kicks in. Probably the most playful song on the list without a ton of bombast in the instrumentation, it does just enough to be a bop without overshadowing the vocals. I'm a huge fan of the simplicity of the visuals, with each team that Karasuna has come into contact with getting screen time. It does a masterful job of showing you just how far you've come since the beginning, all the connections the boys have made along the way, and each character's personality is reflected in their pose or action. The pluckiness of the acoustic guitar in tandem with the fun grooves of the lead guitar and the soft background horns to underscore the rising energy are marvelous. Haikyuu has a ton of delightful music associated with it, but this is undoubtedly my favorite.
Let it all out, let it all out.
Just like Hologram is kind of the best theme for Brotherhood, Let It Out is the best closer to me. One thing I truly love about this ending is how often the first few seconds will be playing before the episode has truly ended, often punctuating a particularly heartfelt or heartbreaking moment. It transitions so seamlessly that I just had to mention that fact. The lyrics are also in sync with the themes of the show and specifically the Elrics and Winry. The visuals are simple, but go a long way in emphasizing that Winry is always looking at Ed and Al's backs, typically as they're going away. Then there's the imagery of the sun setting on Ed and Al's childhood as they gleefully and obliviously rush back to revive Trisha. It's just so good. The instrumentation is soft but punchy when it needs to be during the pre-chorus and chorus itself. To be honest, I can't even tell you what drove me to watch this show, and even weirder, I'm more associated with Tales of Vesperia because that's what I was playing at that time in my life. However, just like 4, I definitely get Disney Renaissance vibes from this song. Everything about it has that 90s softness to it, from the bass kicks to the cross stick on the snare, and even the delivery of the vocals themselves. When it picks up, it still retains that soft dynamic even as the cross stick switches to a full smack of the snare. The visuals themselves are nothing of real interest. I was here exclusively for the song. This is one of those endings where the visuals are cool, like I love the filter they used to give it a grainy painted old film style look, but I was 100% here for the song itself. Aside from River, this is one of my favorite tracks associated with the anime, and I remember thinking to myself upon first listen that it sounded a lot like a Japanese Adele. The full song is just as captivating as the TV spot, and it ended up in my standard rotation in the blink of an eye. In terms of endings for Vinland Saga, it's not even close in my eyes. We've reached the second of 3 anime that gave me a bit of trouble in deciding. I very nearly put the second ending, Style, on here because of just how charming that song is. But what really clinched the victory for strength was the visuals paired with it and the dynamite piano section that opens and closes this ending. By the time we've reached this ending, all hell has broken loose, and the visuals reflect that in terms of the hopelessness the characters face in the wake of the final antagonist. There's a desperation you can feel when the ending is going, and the heavier Style genre-wise does sell that better than the laid-back and frankly adorable ending that Style offers. Honestly, Strength is a banger. I cannot tell you how many times I've been woken up by this song as a kid. This song is what made me double back and watch the show itself. The visuals are the same amount of goofy and playful that you'd expect from the show itself, and the guitar riff that opens and closes the track has randomly been popping in my head for the past 20 years. Just like the Real Folk Blues, Step by Step, and The Homework Never Ends, this is a genuine classic. With Attack on Titan drawing to a close and the way the story has been going, this was such a strong ending to give the audience. Not only is the music haunting in the beginning, but so are the vocals and the lyrics. I love the layered vocals, and once the music swells and has so much emotion behind it both sonically and just from the perspective of someone invested in the narrative. I can't say there are any other endings that I can even tell you about, but this one made a strong first impression and I just kept watching it after each increasingly intense episode. I would also drop this one in the category of summer songs. It has an early 2010s vibe to it despite not even being all that old. Like if you told me this was from 2013, I'd have believed you outright since most pop sounded just like this. I think that's why it caught my attention in the first place, because it sounded like I'd accidentally traveled back to the days when I was working at GameStop. The visuals are static, but full of personality thanks in no small part to the art style and design of the characters. It's not going to top anyone's list, but I would be lying by omission if I didn't place it on this list. This entry is a bit bizarre in terms of the name of this list. See, the anime it was a part of, High School of the Dead, didn't have a dedicated ending track the way others did. After each episode of the 12-episode run, a different song was played. This track was the ending for the 3rd episode, and far and away the best track to grace the closing credit scroll. Like, it's genuinely leagues above its peers, which made it stand out the way it did. Those guitar riffs are so catchy, and when combined with the different melodies, perfectly bottles up the overall tone of a zombie apocalypse. Mountain's vocals also aren't anything to sneeze at. She brings the whole package together to make it what it is. Unfortunately, in the time since the release of High School of the Dead, both she and the story's original author have passed away, but I'm glad that this piece of music exists. Okay, I'm gonna be honest, I do not know why I was so enthralled by this song as a kid. I was really into Dot Hack when I was in like 8th grade, though I couldn't even begin to tell you any kind of real synopsis about the franchise if you had a gun to my head these days. This anime came on extremely late on Cartoon Network to the point where it damn near cycled back around to being on too early. Upon revisiting it, I still think it's a perfectly charming song that also fits snugly into that Disney/DreamWorks box I've been stuffing things into today. The visuals are fine, but it's the music itself that has a kind of soothing nature to it. Definitely one of the newer pieces of media I've consumed. This anime has a solid OP and ending. The OP didn't quite cut it enough to end up in the last video, but there was no way I wasn't going to slot this one on the list. Overthink is a solid hip-hop track that does a surprisingly good job at riding the beat in both languages, as well as having a ridiculously catchy hook that I knew would end up burrowing its way into my brain the moment it began. The beat itself is so laid back that it's damn near lo-fi, although it does get a bit more energetic during the hook. The visuals match the weird shenanigans of the narrative itself and how they ebb and flow onto and then back off the screen. What's interesting is that there's actually a different version of the song that I enjoy more with a lighter audio approach, yet it doesn't make me like this version any less. Alright, last one for today, and man do I love this song. This is the last decision that had me genuinely swapping out my choice over and over. It came down to My Will, Every Heart, and this track. All three are tremendously well crafted songs, and each of them have a very special place in my heart thanks to the memories associated with them. Hell, when I was preparing for this video, revisiting these songs in particular felt like getting run over by a freight train of nostalgia. Anyway, this track beat out the others in how unique the instrumentation is versus its peers, as well as that sense of loneliness it invokes through the performance as well as the lyricism. The visuals mirror that sense of isolation and loneliness with Inuyasha, Kikyo, and even Sesshomaru. This one punches above its weight class sonically, even if I do have to give the better visual victory to My Will. Those traditional Japanese instruments just give it that extra push to force the others out of the way, and there was a period where this was the most played track in my iTunes over literally everything else. It's a wonderful song that made me want to revisit Inuyasha in the near future. So if it pops up on this channel in any form or fashion, you can thank this song for that. And that does it for the list. Just like our previous rodeo, if you didn't see an ending you love on this list, I either haven't seen it or just didn't enjoy it as much as you, which is perfectly okay. Art is subjective, and the goal is to facilitate civil discussions that could lead to new or rekindled enjoyment. With that being said, what are some of your favorite anime endings? Let me know in the comments below. Another big thank you to these wonderful people for their continued support over on Patreon. It means the world to me. With a special shout out to Celestial Tier backers Scrub Zero, Super Sunset, and this one Snack. If you'd like to see your name in the credit scroll and snag a portrait while also supporting the channel, consider heading on over to the Somewhere Past Never Patreon page. Remember to take care of yourselves and others, especially if you live in an area where the heat's been particularly bad this year. I hope your days remainder becomes Saturnian, and as always, thanks for watching.